guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I kind of wanted to talk about the topic of fan art of stuff in general, and I'm going to be showing you guys kind of this piece of Jonghan and like some of these pieces of Woneoo that I've drawn in the past, and I almost treat these ones kind of like studies. I think if you're part of like the K-pop fandom, you probably understand what I mean. But before we get into that, this video is gonna be split into kind of like two parts. So the first half is actually the second drawing that I did, and the first drawing that I did is actually going to be done in time lapse near the end. And it's just because even though I kind of had plans on just doing the one drawing, but after looking at Wonwoo's kind of like official teaser photos and stuff, I actually really like both of them, so I kind of wanted to attempt to draw both of them in my style, so that is what we are going to be working on today. So just from like my own experience, I kind of like almost categorize two different types of fan art that I've kind of done in the past, and I'm sure a lot of people who are also in the K-pop fandom have done something similar. So I know if you are kind of like more into like a K-pop fandom and you participate as like a fan artist or just like to draw based on like the official, I don't know, like teaser photos, any official photos that come out, or like even just screenshots from the music video, a lot of us do like redraws basically. So we redraw the photo that we see into our style, and sometimes when you're in the fandom you can see like a bunch of people's different interpretations of the photo or screenshot or whatever it is. So for me, those ones feel a little bit more like studies in a sense, because you're not really like, other than your interpretation and then your style, nothing's really going to be changed too much. I know some people will alter it a little bit, but for the most part I think the fun of it is kind of seeing the different art styles of how other people in the fandom portray certain members, or like, you know, portray the concept or whatever of the specific photo. But more or less it's kind of like a study, because it's kind of not exactly like a one for one, but it's, you're using the reference material as is kind of thing, like as literally just how you would as a like a photo study kind of thing. So that's what I'm basically going to be doing today, and I've done this a couple of times. I think there is a video too, I think one of June and 17's Mingyu as well. One's a start to finish, or maybe both of them are start to finish, where I showed like the full process of me drawing them, and sometimes they appear a little bit more different, just because when I do these kinds of studies of the official photos usually, or like even music video screenshots, I sometimes like push one thing and then kind of put other things on the back burner. So let's talk about the second one first, which is the one that I'm currently working on. So this one is very much just like normally how I would draw things in my style. I did simplify the eyes a little bit just because in the official photo, Wonwoo's eyes are quite dark. So I didn't really want to have the pupils as piercing, if that makes sense, because I had intentions of making it a little bit more on the blue side to fit the color palette, but I decided not to. And it's kind of like less noticeable on the camera versus like in person, but I'll put the artwork probably near the end after the whole thing, so you can see kind of more of the details of what I decided to push and pull. So the thing that I wanted to get mostly from this particular fan art was actually the gloves, and just like fabric in general for both of these pieces. So let me give you kind of like the little rundown. You guys can search up the official photos. I'm not going to slap them on the screen because I don't think it's as necessary, but you can search it up. It's super easy to find. Just head to their Twitter. Now that I'm stuttering. Or head to their Instagram. You can easily find it. So basically, Wonwoo's kind of wearing, or I guess like the entire concept photos is kind of like a boxing outfit, kind of athletic outfit, and they all have like boxing gloves and a boxing ring kind of esque appearance, I guess. So for Wonwoo, he's kind of wearing a, I don't know, it's like a windbreaker jacket kind of thing, you know, usually what people wear for sports and stuff, and it's kind of more like, it's a little bit more larger, billowy, has like a lot of folds or like creases and stuff, and it's kind of more of that slippery, raincoaty material kind of feeling, or like windbreaker material. And then he has these really bright blue boxing gloves. So I wanted to really try my best to draw the boxing gloves, and then I thought the angle of it just looked nice, so it's just like more things to you know, experiment with. And if you try drawing it out, you maybe have a better idea how to draw like certain things, and then you can use those for future drawings and stuff, which is kind of why I feel like the benefit of drawing fan art is that you can kind of eliminate certain things so that you can focus more on the things you want to focus more on. So let's say for these K-pop fan art, I feel like, because like I said, these are more like studies, but for me personally, I do like focusing more or less on one thing, or kind of a group of things, rather than just how to explain it. Like, I think because a lot of us work in a very like, or at least from what I've seen, some people are very cartoony, some people are very anime. We're not here to do like a photorealism study kind of thing, right? But a lot of things that I like to do, especially if I'm using a photo reference of like a person in real life, or like of real life stuff, is to try to draw it to the best of my ability. So I'm talking about his gloves and his jacket. Now his jacket, I didn't put too much effort into making it more closer to what the reference image looks like, because I didn't have the patience to do the clothing folds, nor in my sketch did I make it really accurate in the first place. But I wanted to have a chance just to render the gloves for the most part, and kind of play with Wonwoo's hair a little bit. So in the reference photo, Wonwoo's hair was kind of more of that, I don't know how to explain it, kind of thinner, wet kind of hairstyle almost, where you can see more of the individual strands. And sometimes when I do fan art, let's say of Genshin characters, or even like my OC Maseki, I tend to bunch up the hair quite a bit, to the point where it's very stylized. It's very much like heavy grouping, very cartoony, where it's like gigantic chunks of hair. But Wonwoo's hair needed kind of like those thinner, wispier kind of bangs that fall on the face. So I tried my best to make sure that, you know, things were thin enough. And then once we get to the coloring, I'm going to try my best to make sure it looks a little bit more, not choppier, but like individual strands of hair here and there for the highlights, and just have a general indication, and kind of being able to simplify it in a way that makes it look readable. And I don't like when I overly render hair sometimes, in a sense that if I am making those smaller strands, I don't want the smaller strands to be absolutely everywhere in the hair, because it becomes very jarring. So you're gonna see that initially, like where I'm coloring right now, I already knocked back the eyes, but his hair is quite dark, so I am still putting in kind of like that, a little bit of that skin tone into his hair, and then I'm going to be knocking it back. But I'm going to be mostly focusing the strands and a lot of the highlights and stuff where I want it to be present on the left side of Woneoo. So you can see I'm already putting that in, and I think when I was recording, I stopped halfway because I had a call with my friends, and I mindlessly started to color and render Wonwoo's hair off camera without thinking. So I do think a good chunk of the hair was done off screen, which is why I probably don't have a lot of footage of it. But from what I remember, I did have a little bit that I could do, but I kind of low-key forgot that I was working on this for a video, because I usually don't record too much of my 17 stuff for videos anymore. Like, a lot of them I like to keep to myself, just because it is kind of more self-indulgent fan art compared to like my Genshin ones, which I just want to draw because it's just kind of fun. But 17, because it's kind of like near and dear to my heart, I like taking my time, or sometimes I don't feel like I want to post the drawing or whatever. It's just kind of for myself. Sometimes I don't feel the need to record it, which is probably why when I was like on the call with my friend, I didn't really realize that I was mindlessly rendering Wonwoo for the most part, especially for the hair, because hair is a little bit more easier for me to manage, especially once I have more or less like the highlights and the values laid out for me, and I can just, you know, pick what I want to really flesh out and which things I kind of want to knock back. So for the gloves, I did try my best to follow the reference for the most part. I still stylized quite a bit, just because I don't know, maybe it's just because I wasn't really prepped for wanting to fully make it look the same. I think there's another one. Actually, let me think. There's like some drawings that I try to follow a little bit more closely, and then some other ones I just do like the base of it and then get rid of the reference, and then when I'm rendering, I kind of just do whatever I want to do with it. And I don't know, sometimes it's a good idea, I think, and sometimes it's a bad idea. Like I said, it depends on what you want to get out of your drawing. So for the other fan art, actually maybe I'll talk about it once we get there, but let me talk a bit about benefits of why I like doing fan art sometimes over doing original art. And I know this is gonna like differ for some people, and some people it might irk them in the wrong way, or like, you know, it's different priorities, I guess. So one thing I do like about fan art, and this is why like I like to draw, let's say, VTubers or like Genshin characters or like pre-existing characters, is the fact that you don't have to think about some things, and in this case it's kind of like character design technically. So when making an illustration and you're working from scratch, if you don't have a character in mind, sometimes you do have to go through like the process of, oh, like what's the character gonna look like? Do I want to think about color palette? You know, like characters' facial features and like all this different kind of stuff that you might want to think about before you actually start on your concept, I guess. But for me, because these characters, like let's say Genshin characters, already have they're finished and they have some kind of lore, or they already have like a fleshed out more or less personality, it makes it a little bit easier for you to just go ahead and draw your concept or whatever without needing to worry about fleshing out the character in terms of like needing to have to make a design, if that makes sense. It just helps you put your focus elsewhere, if that makes sense. And like I said, it's not something that everybody probably wants to do or needs to do or whatever, because I know some people who are strictly just like they only do original art, no fan art kind of thing, and I totally understand. But for me, like if I'm doing studies and stuff, especially if I want to focus on clothes, I don't want to focus my whole attention on trying to be like, do I have to think about hair color? Do I have to think about their eye color? Do I have to think about their facial shape? Like, not really. If I want to draw clothes, I'm going to pick a pre-existing character, even if it's just my own OC, which is why I feel like if you're not really into kind of drawing fan art of pre-existing fandoms or of stories and stuff, if you have OCs, it can still provide the same kind of, I don't know if it's leverage, I guess. Like, it's the same kind of feeling that if you want to put your energy into something where maybe you want to do environment, right? You want to do environment and you want to put a character in it, but you don't want to think of a new character, slap your OC in there. Like, why not, right? Unless it's like important, like for story building, then I do think like you need to put a bit more thought into it for some other things, like for the character to be maybe in the actual environment. But I also think like context wise, like you can also make like AUs, like alternate universes for your OCs, so that they can kind of fit story wise for your prompt or your concept or idea. That's kind of like my general basis on just fan art, because I know a lot of people who maybe are planning to make their portfolios or they're planning to kind of showcase their stuff. A lot of them don't like having fan art part of their portfolio or whatever, because technically 100% of the content is not theirs kind of thing, right? And I totally understand that, but I do see the benefit of, you know, doing fan arts. And another big one, which is kind of like my favorite, is the fact that I get a lot of questions of people asking, how did you meet like certain art friends, or you know, being able to find people who are a little bit like-minded. And one thing for me at least, it's a bit harder to gain a close-knit, how do I explain this? A close-knit of like a group of friends, I guess, via art, not in real life, like online friends, I guess, if you're not in some kind of fandom. Now, I don't think the fandom has to be super specific. Like, it could be even just participating in challenges and stuff could also help you meet new people that might have similar interests. But for me, like, ever since I started doing art in middle school, I was always part of a fandom technically. So like my small group of friends in middle school, we were always into, let's say, I guess like Haruhi, we were into, well, they were into Hetalia. I like the character designs for Hetalia because at the time I never watched any. I watched a little bit of Hetalia when I was older, but you know, couldn't really get into it. And then there's like other fandoms like Shugachara, like the one with like Amu and Ikuto and like the little eggs and like all those stuff, like with, I don't remember their names, Sue, Ran, and Miki or whatever, and Daya. But like there's always like a fandom, so like we were always drawing fan art for each other and like all that kind of stuff. But like when you're online, like sometimes people sort things by the tags, and you know, having things with like fandom tags makes it easier. And you know, people will be like, oh, I recognize that character, you like this series too, or like you like this I don't know, band or whatever. So it was like much more easier, because at the time on DeviantArt, I was more of like a GOT7 and Infinite fan, so I would draw a lot of GOT7 fan art, and a lot of people liked my GOT7 fan art, and I had a hard time finding other in-spirits where I was drawing more Infinite fan art, because Infinite at the time was kind of more or less a fandom that was getting a little bit older, I guess. And once I moved to Tumblr fully, I guess, at the time, I was mostly like a 17 fan artist, and because 17 was so new at the time, there was very little of us, so I feel like I got a lot closer to a lot of the fan artists in that fandom, and we participated in like different little events and stuff, small zines, little store launches, and all that jazz. And like some of them I'm actually still online friends with them till today, though a lot of them I feel like have moved on. But you know, I still cherish a lot of those memories with being able to share art with a fandom that we both have the same appreciation for. So yeah, that's kind of like another thing. And same with Genshin, I think. And I think a lot of people who got into Genshin that are now drawing Genshin fan art are probably finding something similar, even though, you know, getting into fandoms can be kind of scary at times too, because obviously certain things are going to be toxic, and you have to do your, I don't know, your due diligence to try to make sure that, you know, you're not being too overly overbearing about your opinions about certain characters, and vice versa. You're going to be wary about other people's opinions. But being able to like participate, so like if a character has a birthday and a bunch of people are posting about the birthday and stuff, and like, you know, you're celebrating one thing together, I think it's nice. I just think it's like a cute thing. Also just to be super happy about being a part of a fandom, even if it's for like a 2D character kind of thing. I think another thing, it's like, I don't know, I feel like also some people think that if you do fan art, you're gonna be trapped in it a little bit. It's hard to break free from doing original art, and I do agree for the most part, because I do realize that if you look at your like engagement of artwork and stuff, a lot of people who gravitate towards fan art because it has a lot more exposure, and like, you know, people are willing to click on certain art because they're like, oh, I recognize that art, and it's less about sometimes, oh, I like so-and-so's art style, and even though I don't know where this character is from, I'm going to like interact with the artist, if that makes sense. I feel like that's a little less common, because a lot of people are more used to being like familiar with a character. That makes you a lot more like, oh, like I know this character, therefore I'm going to talk about it kind of thing. So yeah, there's kind of like ups and downs, and I do agree that, you know, there's a time and place for fan art kind of thing, but original art is very important too. So yeah, because I think there's an artist I really like, and they were talking about how more recently they were posting original art and it's not getting the same amount of like likes and stuff, but they posted something very relevant to today's anime culture, I guess. There's like a few series that are very popping off right now, and I think they got so much engagement that they got new traction, but hopefully that gives them more confidence to also draw original art too, which I'm sure it does, which is kind of like the good back and forth too, because sometimes you need to post a fan art here or there just to attract people to your art, and then be able to post whatever you would like to. You know, it's kind of like, unfortunately, it feels like mind games with like algorithm or like getting people to notice and stuff, but you know, as long as you enjoy what you're drawing, then I hope that you continue to draw what you enjoy to draw, as long as it doesn't harm others, if that makes sense. Okay, so back to the drawing though, since we're probably nearing the end for the most part. Like I said, I didn't focus too much effort onto the clothing. I mostly focused my effort on making the gloves look like gloves and adding kind of hair strands and like stuff here, just to make sure that Wonwoo's hair appears more detailed, because in the reference his hair is quite wispy. I don't think I got the same amount of depth where his bangs are hanging out kind of where it touches the skin like of his forehead. I don't have the same amount of depth in there, but it's okay. I actually really like this piece though, even though it's like face wise it's a little bit more simple, but you can see I put more effort into certain areas like the gloves and the hair. I think it's kind of more evident. Yeah, I actually really like this one, and we will be moving on to the next one shortly, and I have some thoughts about the other one, but let me show you guys the time lapse for this one as well. But I'll be putting the like clearer time lapse and the actual image at the very end alongside with the other one's time lapse and the image at the very end, just because I think it's just a little bit easier rather than keeping it kind of randomly put in the middle of everything. So color palette wise, really like this one. So I kept the face a little bit more of a, I don't know, a bit on the orangey pinkish side a little bit, just to complement the blue a little bit more. I know in the actual official photo he's actually very much more cooler toned in his skin, like it has much more of like a blue purple filter over top, which I did not go for because I was not paying attention to really wanting to color match everything. I just was caring about texture and getting the gloves to look correct, and I wanted to do the details for the hair. So for the second portion, we are going to be in time lapse because I wanted to fit in the entire process of me drawing this so you can kind of see my struggles. So there's a few angles where I struggle to draw because of the nose, and it's kind of because if you look at the anime style nose, and a lot of people draw noses with like a single line, a little bit of shading, it's very simplified. Sometimes when I draw noses from like the up angle, usually where your nostrils are being shown a lot more, I do have a bit of a problem because I always think like, do I do the simple nose still? Do I like add the nostrils? And a lot more lately in my sketches, I've been adding nostrils and adding just like a block of shading. And I think it's because sometimes when I do gouache paintings too, I do like being able to add kind of like cooler tones and warmer tones to where the nose is, just because I do like the shape of it. And when I draw stuff like realistically in the past, the nose and the eyes have always been my favorite thing to render, just because like the nose tends to have a highlight, there's like a little bit more shifts in values, like even the bridge of the nose and then the bottom part of the nose where the nostrils are and stuff. There's just a good, for me it's like it's easy to see the planes for the nose sometimes, so it was easy for me to paint. And I'm usually talking about like watercolor and stuff where I used to do portraits of 17, either in a little bit more of a semi-realism style or more of a realistic style. I've done both. So I decided to compromise and try to do this up angle pose where Wonwoo's kind of like, his face is tilted up a bit and he's kind of looking at the camera. It's kind of like, it feels like a cocky kind of attitude, even though his demeanor isn't technically like that. So I decided that I would just do the nostrils and we'll kind of play around with the shading and stuff to see what I like. So I decided to also kind of finagle my way through the background so it looks somewhat similar, but like I said, I'm not aiming technically for accuracy. Here I am aiming a little bit for color temperature, but I mostly wanted to do is the clothing and his face. So like I said, I was kind of doing a lot of pushing and pulling depending on how I wanted to draw his face, because sometimes I like to go much more simple and I don't really add like the actual lip line and like, is this called a philtrum? I don't know what it's called. Like the cupid's bow-ish area. So like right between the nose and the mouth. And I don't know, like sometimes I simplify it to the point where I literally just do one band of shading for the upper lip, a little bit of shading for the lower lip, and that's it. And like right under the lip, you do that thing for kind of like the bulge of the chin almost. But for this one, I wanted to play around with it, but the more I did it, it didn't really read correctly in my opinion. So I'm gonna be fixing it quite a bit. Also, the color is not gonna be accurate. Blue, I don't know, blue is very hard for my camera to pick up properly, so this blue is gonna look very jarring sometimes, a little purple sometimes. It's gonna keep changing pretty much throughout the whole thing. But this is kind of like the texture I was talking about for the jacket, because it is kind of like that windbreaker-ish material. And if I didn't worry about the proportionings of the actual canvas, I would have liked to draw the full teaser photo, because I really like the outfit because it also has him in like little shorts or whatever. So I wanted to include it because right here where I have it cut off, it kind of looks like a weird angled pants in a way, because one side of his pants is kind of flaring out a little bit more because his leg is aimed that way, but it's also because it's shorts, so it kind of flares out a little bit. So I wish I included it, but I didn't want this piece to be overly long, but I also didn't want to draw his face too small because like I said, the face was part of what I wanted to kind of finagle my way through, because like I said, I don't draw usually noses this way, and I I'm not planning on going into like a semi-realism style either, so I don't want to put too much detail where the point is it looks too rendered in a sense. There is a certain point where I do get to a certain stage of painting it where I do feel like it was too much, so I am going to change it. I'm also going to change the direction of his nostrils and stuff. I think this appears a little bit more softer. The other one's definitely more stylized in the sense that I just drew them willy-nilly. These ones are pointing properly how nostrils actually look like, but I did not make them the same shape or the same like how big they would be if you drew them more realistically, so that's not exactly my goal. But yeah, hair wise, same deal. And I did do this Wonwoo fan art before doing the other one, and you can see that I was caring about the wispiness, but I'm not trying to make this realistic. So I actually made the bangs line work, or like the outlines and stuff, much darker. Now I've done this in previous pieces where it's a little bit more wispy and I have more of that skin tone bleeding into the hair, and I do the outlines much more darker. I just like the look a lot personally, and I think in certain areas for Wonwoo, other than like the inside details, I actually kept some of the line work, or like me refining it a little bit darker and a little bit thicker, just because I did want to keep it in that stylized realm a lot. So yeah, I wanted to still for it to read a little bit more cohesive, because I don't like if I rendered the face to a certain extent and everything else is super simplified, it looks a little bit jarring to me, so I didn't really want that. Trying to think. So yeah, I did do the second one after this one, but I posted it first just because I personally liked it a little bit more. I'm going to experiment a little bit with drawing the face a little bit more again, because I realized I don't also draw faces facing upward. So you know where your chin to your neck area connects? I feel like it makes sense to me if I paint it, but when I draw it, sometimes it doesn't make sense because the underside of the chin is a little bit of a different shape. And if you don't draw, I guess, the nose, the mouth, and the eyes going at the right angle, it's gonna read very odd, which I kind of struggle a little bit. So it's definitely showing me my weak spots for sure. So like, even though I do have like a photo reference, you can see that even though when I'm trying to stylize it, I'm having struggles because I don't have the I think it's just showing how weak my fundamentals are sometimes. So yeah, I definitely need to redraw the face over and over again at different angles so I know how to draw them more properly and be able to express the depth and the actual shape of the face properly when they're in different angles. So hopefully in the future I'm gonna do some more practice of that. There's a lot of things I want to practice though, so we'll see when I can get to them. I don't think I'm gonna make them all into videos, like I said. I think I might do clothing material one day, and then I will do also, I might do hands again and feet, and then maybe the flower studies thing. I've been putting my flower studies on the back burner just because I lost my little buffer room for video making, and I decided to stream a lot more this week and trying to finish my sketchbook, so I've been having a little bit less time. I also changed the text on his windbreaker thing, so it says Woneoo instead of some other brand, I think. So I think that's it for Woneoo for the most part. I know in this portion I'm gonna forget to put his ring on, but I'll have it in the final version. I totally forgot because I started to erase the hands at some point and I didn't put it in. I was just more worried about the shape of the hands. I also forgot to put a little bit of a shadow of where the hands are touching the bar, so it looks like it's kind of floaty. Yeah, I think that's about it though. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video for the most part. I know not people probably enjoy the format of this portion where it's all time-lapse and you can see my hand kind of in the way. I don't know if people like seeing this, but if it's fine with you guys, do let me know, and maybe I'll do more where I'll do more than one illustration but then keep the other ones fairly short by putting them more in this time-lapse-ish way. But yeah, my focus mostly fabric and getting kind of a bit of that face in there. Apologies that's so blown out, but here's kind of like the little time-lapse replay version. You can see I planned out the body, finishing the face, and then I'm gonna have to kind of keep changing his proportions a little bit because sometimes I draw the head a little bit too large. But I had a lot of fun drawing Wonwoo. It's been a while since I've done an actual piece like this of him. from a pre-existing photo. So yeah, I had a lot of fun drawing him, and I wish to draw him a lot more, hopefully. I might draw some of the other boys' teaser photos as well. There's some other photos that they've done for magazine shoots too. But I think that's it for today. So those are the 2 different illustrations, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!